Okay, we're on the Unit 4 review pocket, and we're on question number 4, topic 10b and c. So we're given this equation, and we need to describe these things. So first of all, the number of possible zeros. To do that, I'm looking at my highest exponent, and this one's already written in standard form. If it is not written in standard form, write it in standard form. It's much easier to do these problems when it is written in standard form. And remember that standard form means that my highest exponent is first, and they all go in order. So here I have 8, then 3, then 2, then 1, then my constant. So they always, your answer should always be written like this in standard form with the biggest exponent first and going down. So the number of possible zeros is actually my highest degree, which is 8. That is saying I could have 8 zeros. I can't have more than that. I might have less than that, but I can't have more. The maximum number of turns is 1 less than that highest degree, so that is 7. This is an even function with a negative leading coefficient. That means that both ends are pointing down. It's a touchdown, but it's a kind of an opposite touchdown with both ends pointing down, which means that both of my end behaviors are. But again on this, you can graph this in your calculator and look at it to find the end behaviors. You don't need to memorize the end behaviors. And then is 2 a zero of the function? Well, the way to find that out is plug it in. So if I go and say 2 stow x, and then I put in this equation, negative 3x to the 8th plus 6x to the 3rd minus 3x squared plus 2x minus 34. If 2 is a 0, when I push enter, this will equal 0. If it is not a 0, it's going to equal something else. And the answer is no. It is not a 0. Because when I entered this in, I did not get 0. So the answer is no. When, oh, you know what? I didn't put negative 2 in. Let's try that again. Negative 2 stow x. I put positive 2 in. So let's go up here. Instead of retyping it, you can highlight and push enter. But it's still not a 0. It doesn't equal 0. When x is negative 2, y is not 0. Y is negative 866. So your other option too for doing this, besides using your stow button and plugging it in or doing it by hand, is look at the graph. You have a graphing calculator, put that in y equals and see does it cross at negative 2. And this one does not. And then for my y-intercept, everything is 0. You're putting zeros in for all your x's and you're seeing what y is. So I have y equals negative 3 times 0 to the 8th plus 6 times 0 to the 3rd minus 3 times 0 squared plus 2 times 0 minus 34. And I've already got it typed in here. So all I need to do here is say 0 stow x, or I can do it by hand there, and it's not a hard one to do by hand. Push enter again, and it tells me my y value is negative 34. And you can see that's what I get here when I do it by hand. Anything times 0 is 0. Anything times 0 is 0. Anything times 0 is 0. So the only thing I have left is that negative 34. So that's the answer there. All right, topic 10b, c, and d. So I'm given this graph this time, and I want to know, is it odd or even? Well, does it look like a touchdown or does it look like disco? This one looks like disco because I have one going in one direction and the other one going in the other direction. So remember, it's odd if they're going in 2 different directions. That's going down, that's going up. So this one is definitely odd. And then, is the lead coefficient positive or negative? So remember, there's 2 options. You either have odd functions that look like this, or you have odd functions that look like this. And one of these is when you have a positive leading coefficient, and the other one's when you have a negative. So yes, you can memorize it, or you can do a quick test. Put any odd function in your calculator. So x to the 3rd, that's an odd function, and hit graph. I am going to want to zoom 6 and get this back to my normal window. All right. So there's my odd function with a positive leading coefficient, and I can see it looks like this picture. So I know that the leading coefficient here is positive, and I didn't even have to memorize anything. Right? If I do this, negative x to the 3rd, that has a negative leading coefficient. It looks the opposite. The one on the left is going up, and the one on the right is going down. So this is a really quick, easy check on your calculator. You don't have to memorize it. All right, are there any roots that are even multiplicities? So that means I have a bounce if I have an even multiplicity. So yeah, I definitely have a bounce, right? I have here, it bounces off and comes back up. So yes, there is a bounce at 1. And then it asks me, are there any with odd? So that's a point of inflection. So yes, that's kind of here. It doesn't go straight up. You can see it kind of goes, does a little waver, and keeps going. It doesn't bounce and go back down. It doesn't reverse direction, but it has a little inflection there. So yes, right there at -2. All right, my least possible degree. So how many turns do I have on this one, right, is what I'm looking for. And I know that it has to be an odd degree as well. So make sure when you're counting turns, because sometimes you can miss them. Because if I'm really quick here, I can say, oh, 1, 2, 3 turns. And then I would say, oh, it must be 4. But I know it can't be that because it's not an even function. It's an odd function. So make sure you are careful when you do that, when you count. And so on this one, because I have this bounce, I've got 1, 2, but then really 3, 4. So my least possible degree is 5. And then again, my end behavior. So this is my right end behavior as it goes toward infinity. This is my left end behavior. So as I go this way toward infinity, my y goes up, up, up toward infinity. And as I go left, my y goes down, down, down toward negative infinity. All right, last one I think for this topic is write a polynomial function which has at most 3 turns, a y-intercept of 0, 5, and as x approaches infinity, f of x equals negative infinity. So what that means, let's look at what it means. 3 turns, that means I'm looking at a degree of x to the 4th. So that's an even function. An even function where as I approach infinity it goes down means it has to have a negative leading coefficient. Otherwise it would be facing the other way. So those are 2 important things. So you can write anything as long as you have a negative leading coefficient. I could have negative x to the 4th, and then to have a y-intercept of 0, 5 means that when x is 0, y has to be 5. Well, if I make this 0, the only way to get y to be 5 is plus 5. You could do other ones. I could have negative 3x to the 4th plus 2x, right? That's still a negative leading coefficient. My highest degree is still 4. And then to get that y-intercept to be 0, when those x's are 0, my y is 5. So you can have multiple answers here. This is probably your most simple answer that you could put down. And I would graph these and check it too. So I would go to my calculator after I came up with this and put negative x to the 4th plus 5 and hit graph and see, do I have the right end behavior? Do I have at most 3 turns? I don't have more than 3 turns. Is my y-intercept 5? So yeah, it looks like my y-intercept is 5. As I go to the right, it's definitely going down to negative infinity, and I don't have more than 3 turns. So yes. And again, this part, if you want to zoom in a little bit, I would hit window, maybe go from -2 to 2 to really kind of see what's happening there. And zooms in just a little bit more. All right, so that is everything, I think, for topic 10.